We're here with Dr. Perry Braun with her book, Thrive. We're going to talk about all sorts of things today. You're a holistic practitioner, and we've brought on a lot of people who've been through ritual abuse over the years, people who've actually had their story to tell, or people who help people get out of there. I like your energy so far. I like your attitude, and I like that you're willing to jump into the darker parts of helping people get out of the darkness, I guess, and the things that they've been through. And I think sometimes, like last couple episodes, we've been talking about the afterlife, and we have Bob Larson talking about exorcism. And I think sometimes when people know there's a problem, they get initial help, but then they need more help to put themselves back together emotionally and kind of figure out what I've been almost fragmented. And I think we're going to talk a lot about projects today that have been rumored to exist over the years, things that our government has done to get people in here to use them as science experiments, and these abuses that take place. And people are like, that doesn't exist or whatever. So we can start wherever you want. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Blurry Creatures. Thanks for coming to our basement. What are your thoughts on Bigfoot? And then we can go wherever you want. These are the hardest ones because we don't know where to start.
Sure.
But there's so much to talk about.
So I believe Bigfoot is an inner earth creature. So he's not extra dimensional. I think he lives in the earth. They live in the earth. And there's portals or doorways or whatever you want to call it where the footprints disappear. And I believe he's a hybrid. So I'm not sure if he's a government project or he was created by, thousands of years ago with some kind of Nephilim DNA experiment. But I think clearly where people have the psychic interaction with him, you have to say that's a non-terrestrial or extraterrestrial phenomena to have that psychic communication.
Do your patients talk about Bigfoot at all to you? Or?
I have one person I know who's had a Bigfoot encounter, but actually I have another one who she communicates with big feet.
Oh, big feet, multiple foots.
They seem to be drawn to her. So
Earth.
Yeah, what's an inner earth creature like? Is there
so when you really start to go down this pathway, you realize, I'm sure you've heard about the DUMBs and the deep underground military, all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of am a hollow earth person after doing this for a while. And people who've been trained, programmed, not just in military bases, but in lots of things deep down underneath ground.
Yeah.
So I think there's a whole world down there that has maybe pre-Adamic races and pre-flood species and races and
things
whatever.
That go bump in the night, Robin.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't know that they're all nefarious. I think they exist down there and they're pretty much not necessarily all wanting to harm us or interfere with us. And they might be a little scared of us. So I'm not that worried about them.
That's a heck of a start to the episode.
I love it when a sweet lady comes in and then just starts dropping all this. Well, there's all this crazy stuff that exists down there.
But if you're new to the show, this isn't something we had. This is something we actually talked about. We had Trent on twice, who was a multi-PhD, purportedly who worked in the DUMBs. Talked to Alberino about it a lot. Tim has talked about the DUMBs and what he calls the DUMB state and this idea of these deep underground military bases and lev trains underneath.
Yep.
Underneath.
Well, look
at
what Musk is doing right now. He's like building out the lev trains.
Yeah.
They have them under Hollywood now. There's videos of them.
It's wild. Let's talk about
we probably had 10 episodes on this topic, specifically, and kind of loosely talked about it. But these are the episodes that kind of ruffle everyone's feathers because these are wild things that people are telling you.
Well, I always say the red pill is best taken in small bites. And I think that that's the best way to shift your paradigm. It's really overwhelming to have too big of a shock. Most people go back in denial. I'm a psychologist, so most people go back in denial if something's too shocking, which is what we saw with all the alien stuff, right? They just went right back in denial. And so I think we're in a season where, and you guys are a big part of this, is people are open to these disclosures little by little by little. And even in the SRA survivor community, it's exploding. These people are coming out of the woodwork. Their memories are coming back in an exponential form, and more people are getting trained and knowing how to work with these clientele. And it's a need. It's a huge need.
Can you talk a bit about how, just so for everyone listening, so how because we're going to get into SRA. This is where you are now. But how do you get to where you are? You're a psychologist, but how do you start in that space and then end up where you're working with satanic ritual abuse victims and all these projects we're going to get into, whether it be Montauk or Monarch, stuff with Freemasonry and voodoo dolls, Illuminati, all these things that we've touched on briefly, whether it be with Dan Duvall or Dr. Schnoblin or whoever. Yeah. These all sort of are now part of your world, but how do you get there?
Well, I think, when I look back at my journey from psychology to nutrition to, holistic energy medicine, it was all very divinely led, kind of step by step. I didn't necessarily wake up one day and go, I want to do this. It didn't exist. And so it's a long story how I got there. I pretty much tell my story in my books. I have a few books I've written. And I had this dream in 2008, and I had met a friend at church who worked explicitly with survivors, exclusively with survivors, and had some crazy stories. I thought they were fascinating, but so I had this dream, and I was part of John Paul Jackson's dream. So we were all trained in dream interpretation. It's kind of a thing. So I have this dream, and basically the gist of the dream was this person gave me a bag of money, and I opened it up, and I looked at it, and I handed it back to her, and I said, no, thank you. And I knew what the dream meant. I did not want to work with survivors. It's a long haul. It was hard. I had worked in sex addiction for a long time. I didn't see a lot of recovery there. And I was like, can you just let me work in something where people get well faster? And so I really resisted over the years, but Jehovah's Sneaky kept sneaking those clients in, unbeknownst to me, that were survivors. And so little by little, I kind of had to, and I have some crazy stories, right, of these people that I didn't know, and then their memories start coming back as we peel the layers back. Learned along the way, started reading, books like On the Path of the Immortals by Tom Horn, and started realizing there's all this Nephilim and, alien and all this other stuff that, and I've always been a conspiracy theorist. My favorite movie was Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson forever. Like, I didn't know why. Like, it's just God's trajectory has been this, and I didn't understand it. And around 2021, God brought me this one, and I've had several survivors over the years, but a lot of it, I would work with them for a while and then try to get some other help because I just didn't feel trained in it. And then stupidly, I decided to do my PhD dissertation on using the modality I created to help heal people with trauma-based mind control. So thinking, I'll just teach other people how to do it and I won't have to do it myself, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that just opened a door and they all kind of started finding me. And I think what shifted for me was seeing that it actually, the model I created really did help people heal faster. And I think part of my objection was, I'm not a hand holder. I don't know that I can work with someone for 15 years and not see results. And just didn't feel very confident. But as I started seeing my authority grow in my prayers and reading more and studying more, God just kept bringing them. But one of the things that happened, and this is a significant part of what I want to share today, is in August of 2022, the Lord really said, will you surrender to working with this population? And I work with other people too. It's not my only population. And I finally said yes. And at that point, I'd had several survivors I'd worked with, and they had done my training, and I was seeing them really progress. And my thought was, this kind of, I love what the afterlife guy, the near-death experience said about the whole view of your life is how much did you love, right? Because John Paul Jackson had an encounter with God 20, 30 years ago, and that always stuck with me, that he went to heaven and God asked him, how much did you love? So I've kind of always had that. At the end of the day, it's all about love. It's all about love. And so I kind of saw these people as, Jesus leaving the 99, going after the one. These are the most broken, traumatized, beat up people. And they're not going to really ever do anything. They're just going to barely make it. And that was kind of my mindset. But this idea that Jesus loves them so much that he would leave the 99 for them. And so I said yes. And shortly into it, I realized God gave me a whole different paradigm. He goes, no, you missed it. He goes, the enemy has spent their whole life, these people's whole lives, training them to be super soldiers for a New World Order end-time programming. And then God, the author of Plot Twist, right, the master of Plot Twist, said, thank you, I'll take it from here. They wake up to their story. They all have parts and alters that know Jesus. And so they go look for help. And when they get cleaned up, and I'll share some of these stories today, they have authority in the spirit realm to take down realms and structures and dimensions and free thousands of parts and altars. And like, they are why we're seeing, in my opinion, we're seeing this veil being lifted off of all this darkness is because they're the ones who are doing the prayer work up in the heavenlies to bring those veils down. And so they are truly God's super soldiers now.
Wow.
And it's a really cool honor to get to be a part of their process to see them get there. And they're just normal people you wouldn't know any different seeing them on the street.
You hear the word dog man on this show, Luke, and you think something completely different than what we're about to talk to you about. No, we're talking about dog owners out there, man's best friend. And if he's slowing down, if he's starting to itch, if he's got bad breath, if he's losing interest in playtime, what do you do, Luke?
What we found is for my 2 dogs is rough greens. They love the taste of it. It's an addition to their food. It's not a food replacement. It's a supplement. It supports long-term health by providing live bioavailable nutrients, including essential vitamins, minerals, probiotics, digestive enzymes, and omega oils. And it has been a game changer for our 2 dogs. Our 2 dogs are older, and it's more pep in the step. It's got anti-inflammatory compounds that help reduce stress, support immune system, and it really slows the age decline as far as we've seen. It's helping dogs stay active, mobile, and alert. We got a chance to talk to the creator of this, Dr. Dennis Black. Amazing guy. He is the longest living stage 4 kidney cancer survivor, 40 years. And the way he did that is he really changed what he ate. And so when he found this secret to really reversing this sickness, he decided he wanted to do that for our pets as well.
Instead of just changing the whole entire dog food industry, Dr. Dennis Black decided to put some basically vitamins in the dog food. Bring your dog food back to life.
So right now, Nate, Rough Greens is offering a free Jumpstart trial bag. You just have to cover the shipping. Use discount code Blurry to claim your free Jumpstart trial bag at roughgreens.com. That's RUFFgreens.com, promo code Blurry.
Don't change your dog food. Just add Rough Greens and watch the health benefits come alive. Speaking of normal people, most people have a hard time getting to where you are. Obviously, we're so skeptical by nature. How do you sort of take your patients and some of our listeners into a place where they're willing to understand the complexity of these realms and entities, and how they begin to heal? Because most people, when they feel like their paradigm's being challenged, they'll either shut off the podcast, they'll call someone a name, they'll have this knee-jerk reaction. And I think that a big part of what we've done over the years is just, people will say things in an interview that I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But let's keep talking because I'm not sure right now. And even in the middle of, an hour-long session where it's like, okay, I have to make room for that probably because maybe that's true But I don't know. It takes a long time for your brain to be able to get hit with those kinds of darts.
Well, I think, one, you have volume, right? Yeah. You've had books written about Montauk. Montauk was a thing. It's a fact.
Yeah.
Stranger Things was loosely based on Montauk. A lot of truth in that. So there's lots of books written on Montauk. There's enough Montauk survivors who can give you detailed memories apart from ever having read anyone else's story. So just like the way you guys do it, it's empirical investigation, right? There's tons and tons of books written by survivors and accounts and stories. And just like alien abductees, at some point you have to go, too many people have had the same experience that you have to start giving validity to this. And a big part of this podcast is the Nephilim. And I mean, look at the Old Testament.
Right.
There was a small group of Hebrews. Everybody else was sacrificing their babies to some awful, terrible god.
Yeah.
Right? So human sacrifice, drinking of blood, eating of cannibalism, none of that is new.
Right.
We just thought it went away because we got civilized. I'm like, no, Lucifer still demands the same payment, the same currency.
You hear those things, right? Like sort of the ritualistic stuff that people talk about out of Hollywood, for example, is the one that first comes to mind, right? Is these blood drinking and what they call mock cannibalism, whether that's mock or not. But
Abramovich, I
want to start though with what you just said. So super soldiers, right? My thought, and we talked about this pre-roll, is Russ Dizdar wrote this book about this, but through your experiences and research, how is satanic ritual abuse and the occult attempting to build super soldiers? Is it through these projects? Is that?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really important to understand is bloodlines. Okay. So Illuminati bloodlines. So I deal with a lot of generational iniquity. It's a big part of my process. And one of the things the church really has not valued is understanding that we have legal ground and open doors. I mean, the whole Freemasonry thing, I would say the biggest ill in America is the generational results of so much Freemasonry here. It's addiction, depression, anxiety, sexual abuse, incest. It all comes down from Freemasonry. And so when you start to understand how the DNA is actually, and I'm obviously a quantum, person too. So if you understand the DNA is actually energy, it's actually a frequency. Our whole body is made up of frequencies. And so it's a storage, it's a supercomputer for your ancestry. And Satan is about legalities. It's about legal ground. We call it open doors, legal ground. And so part of what the Illuminati, why they inbreed, but they abuse their own. They kill the throwaways. They abuse their own. They reprogram, they retrain. They have this programming, this mindset of this is our life. They torture their own children because they're reproducing the next generation of themselves. And so the belief is, and this is why we use the word monarch, why they pick the monarch butterfly is the monarch mother will fly somewhere far away, give birth to her babies, leave them. They'll grow up, cocoon, become a butterfly. They'll fly back home. They have in their DNA, they know where home is. Okay. So our DNA has this blueprint of everything in our ancestry. So iniquity piled upon piled, the Illuminati understand they have to mount up iniquity in the bloodline, in the DNA to gain great power, dark power. And so all these people in these projects, they're not randomly chosen off the streets. They all have Illuminati bloodline. They all have their third eye was opened by their ancestor. They have psychic gifts and psychic powers. They're born with it. They don't necessarily know they're from an Illuminati bloodline or their parents. Some of them are born into already, they're in SRA families, and that's part of it. A lot of them have Illuminati bloodlines, and they just happen to be, the parent just happens to be a CIA or a military, and they're on a military base already, and so they get used and picked. But none of it is random. These people are picked for these projects because it's in their bloodline. It's in their DNA.
And what is Project Monarch?
Well, Monarch is really the one of the first names of what we would then call MK Ultra. It's this idea of mind control programming. It's kind of an overarching umbrella term and one of the earlier names. Mengele started his experiments in Nazi Germany. Operation Paperclip was where we brought all the Nazi scientists that Mengele had taught on how to do all this trauma-based mind control to the U.S. They began to work all that. Fast forward, I think maybe Laura Sanger talked about the Hitler Project a little bit on here.
Yep.
So I believe Montauk was then an extension of the Hitler Project, where they took Camp Hero out in Montauk, Long Island, and they built all the tech there. And that's where they had, 12 layers of underground bases of, and there's a lot of Montauk survivors who've written books and told stories about what it was like. And it's pretty crazy.
So if we're looking at we're building out like a hierarchy, you have sort of this Illuminati is that over the top of this? And then Project Monarch becomes this umbrella by which you have MK Ultra, Montauk, and a number of other trauma-based mind control programs were run by the CIA. We know that MK Ultra, especially that one.
They were all government dark ops, right? But they were so one of the things I find is that people will come and their first memories will be kind of maybe satanic ritual abuse, some dark stuff. Most of the government stuff is what we call delta programming, meaning they're in a deeper brainwave state. It's not the first thing they remember. It's usually after you peel back some layers, they start having memories of what we would call underground military bases, being strapped down, electroshocked, some of these other things I can talk about that are some of my clients, and then obviously some other stories too. Montauk in particular was this very overarching project, and the overall goal was everything's about end times, New World Order, but it's also super soldier, right? Hey, if Russia's doing it, we better be doing it too. Yeah. You look at the Manchurian Candidate, you look at the Born Identity, right, where they did assassin programming. Okay, so ultimately, a lot of it is building out assassins or super soldiers.
Zoolander too, Robin. Derek Zoolander was a trained
That's really important.
Well, I think it's interesting. It's like the government knows that these ancient occult things were happening, but they kind of do it in a more scientific way.
Well, and what you're going to find is that it's emerging. Right, you go back to Jack Parsons, Aleister Crowley, and Babylon Rising, where they're opening portals, they're starting to do all this. Montauk, you're dealing with overall, survivors will say they saw reptilians there, they saw many species of aliens there, Mengele was there, scientists in lab coats were there. So they're all working together, not necessarily in unity, but they all have a role to play. And those are reports from multiple survivors of what they saw and experienced. Ultimately, there's two things that Montauk was about, was fully developing, being able to operate in full potential of your brain. You say we only use 10% of our brain.
Yeah.
So it's high level developing psychic gifts like remote viewing and psychic assassination and telekinesis and pyrokinesis and teleportation, all being able to use the mind to do all that, and psychic communication. And then you had Looking Glass, which was a device that they believe came from alien technology, where, and like I said, I like to reference movies to kind of give people a baseline. It was like in the movie Paycheck, where Ben Affleck reverse engineers this device where they can look into the future about possibilities. And so one of the cool stories, which I always like to share, redemptive stories, is supposedly around 2012-13, the deep state, using Looking Glass, went in and they found out that no matter what happened after this certain time, they couldn't win. They were going to lose. So there was no possible future trajectory where they were going to win. And so that's good news, right? Like, they don't get to win. So Looking Glass, but then also a big part of Montauk is creating wormholes for traveling to Mars. I know that's crazy, but all of this is crazy. But then when you see story after story after story of time travel from here to there instantaneously, time travel, several reports of children being sent back to the time of Jesus, and they couldn't kill them. They were assassins, and they fell in love with them. And so then they sent him back to try to get some blood from the cross because they wanted to try to clone Jesus. I know this stuff's crazy.
It's wild.
No, many of the stories on blurry creatures are frightening, and I think for some people out there, they don't ever connect that close to home. But there's a woman out there who may have recently become pregnant, and the fear takes over, and it's her first pregnancy. She doesn't know what to do, and maybe abortion crosses her mind. But we've partnered with Preborn Network to help give those people who are in that state of fear another option.
Yeah, that's right. At Preborn Network Clinic, she didn't find judgment. She found compassion, truth, and healing. And for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. When she became pregnant again, everything was different. She returned to the clinic excited. She saw her baby on an ultrasound. She heard that tiny heartbeat, and it confirmed what she already knew in her heart. Today, her daughter is alive. Her heart beats freely outside the womb because there was an ultrasound that was available and free at the right moment.
I think it's important to sit in this stool and consider that life is important, and we are pro-life here. And just all the crazy stories we've heard over the years, you kind of can't not be. And life is sacred and life is important. And with Preborn, they provide all the things that a woman would need in a season of unknowing and confusion.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, free ultrasounds, counseling for up to 2 years, diapers, maternity clothes, and the hope of the gospel all for free. And that's why this is so important to us, because one ultrasound is just $28. All gifts are tax deductible, and 100% of your donation goes directly to saving babies. So please join us and support Preborn. To donate securely, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby, or go to preborn.com/blurry. That's preborn.com/blurry.
Real quick, a broad question, I guess.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think a lot of times when people get into conspiracy theories, the first thing they say is the government. But you're kind of outlining a system that above the government is a whole hierarchy of darker things. And the government is sort of the, kind of down the line to sort of, they have the assets and they have the funding to sort of almost manufacture some of these things or test them. But above that, there are these sort of satanic groups that are really running them. And I think a lot of people say, well, anything else outside of that is sort of a demonic deception. It doesn't exist.
Right.
Is sort of the open-minded Christians critique of a lot of the things you're talking about. Well, that sounds so wild and fantastic, it can't exist. So it must be some demonic thing, when we've kind of relegated a lot of that into its own camp of, there are these spirits. They do oppress and attack people. But
Right.
there's also all this other stuff too.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I mean, I know that we're sitting down and we're talking going 100 miles an hour, and a lot of people
Right.
listening just they haven't interviewed people.
Right.
They haven't worked with patients.
Right.
So they don't know what we're talking about, really. A lot of this is what people are telling you when can you explain sort of how you get these stories told to you?
Sure.
And what happens so that people that are listening can go, okay, that makes a little more sense.
And can I caveat that as well and say, can you, when you share that, can you tell us why you think we can trust it? Because I think there's a lot of people that will hear this kind of stuff and they automatically shut off. Like Nate said, they have a visceral reaction to this,
Sure.
and they say, SRA isn't real. We've had SRA episodes. We had Children in the Woods. We've talked with Dan Duvall. We've talked. These have become very controversial on
Sure.
our page because people
Audrey,
don't believe it. They just like this doesn't happen. These people are imagining, or they're being sort of led to believe that these fantasies are actual memories. But you walk in this. So Nate said, like, how do you listen to these stories, and then why do you think you can trust it? And why do you think you can believe it?
Well, I do a lot of empirical research.
Right.
So a couple answers to your question. I just ask people to go read stories, go read books, go read stories. You know, Kathy O'Brien was a presidential sex slave. She's got a lot. She's got 2,000 pages of paperwork in her books. Like, there is tons.
She's coming in next month.
All right.
Yeah,
there's tons and tons of data and evidence, right? Like, these are people who can back up their experience with data. So I don't talk about, not everybody knows I do this, right? Because it's dark. And it's like, if your world is never going to merge with my world, like what? Let's talk about happy. My whole brand is peace and joy. It's a pivoting everything to redemption, peace and joy. So if it's just going to put you in despair, and my thing is, hey, let's find the problem, but there's always a solution.
Right.
You know, God's doing something in the midst of this. You can bury your head in the sand, but it might not work out for you so well in the long run to, you know, ignore things that are in our world that are making us sick and depressed. So that's one answer is I don't need to convince anybody. And secondly, there's people listening to this and it's pinging them because they have some weird memories from their childhood that don't fit in with their screen narrative. Everybody's got a screen story. A lot of people's memories don't come back till their late 30s or 40s. And all of a sudden they start having weird nightmares. Like, the average person doesn't just dream about being in the middle of a forest surrounded by people in black hoodies sacrificing children. You know, you just don't have those kind of dreams normally. Or, you know, people wake up in the middle of the night and there's a 9-foot reptilian standing in your room and you can feel his presence. Like, if you've had any of these experiences, then this is believable. For the people who are listening who haven't, great. And I think, again, back to the Illuminati, I don't have an Illuminati bloodline. I don't have a lot of personal demonic experiences.
Right.
You know, little season where you wake up and you eke out in the name of Jesus because you feel like that's about it, which is why I'm not super afraid of this, because it doesn't ping me. I wasn't sexually abused. I don't have that trauma. I don't know why God picked me for this.
Right.
And part of it is I believe I have a clean bloodline, so I'm not highly targeted. I've done a lot of personal work on closing legal ground, so I don't get a lot of backlash. A lot of ministers won't touch this because it's brutal. It's the other thing is these people are being targeted. It's like, if this isn't real, then why is there so much attack and warfare and satanic, demonic stuff that always happening in these people's lives? So I think that a lot of the people who this is just so weird, you probably don't see any of either one. There's a big, strong denial thing there. Or two, it's just not going to touch your life because you're not from one of those bloodlines. I don't care about you.
And remember, too, that like this is trauma-based, right? So we know scientifically that when people experience trauma, especially severe trauma, they compartmentalize. And these things these people will talk about blacking out and not remembering things, right? So there's a lot of data predication for the effects of trauma upon our memories and our brain. So just to put that out there for folks, because it does sound fantastical.
Dissociative identity disorder is on the DSM-5.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
And so, dissociating versus having full-blown altered personalities, we can prove that. We have enough data. Well, how do those personalities get created to be so extreme? There had to be severe trauma. Sometimes it's sexual abuse or incest, but when it's really extreme, you're going to find something deeper and darker that, that caused it, that created it. So people have memories come back. That's one of the ways. The second thing is an abreaction. So an abreaction is where you suddenly are feeling electroshocked in your body for no particular reason, because your memory of being electroshocked comes back. Or people are curling up in the floor in a fetal position and sobbing like they're 3 years old. Like, these aren't normal behaviors, but your body stores that trauma, which is another reason holistic therapy is good, because we are looking at the body memories. The body stores your trauma memories. And so when you start dealing in this world, there's tons and tons and tons of science behind everything I'm saying. It sounds so absurd and crazy if you've never heard it.
Right.
But once again, you start taking those red pills in small bites, it just becomes a fully understandable, world.
Well, I think about movies, though. Primal Fear is the one I think of right away, right? I think it's a great one. Ed Norton's a phenomenal actor. I love Edward Norton's movies. But this movie, he's sexually abused by a priest. And he has this alter ego, which in this alter ego murders the priest. And this whole movie is about, he goes in this severe trauma as an altar boy, but he has there's two people in there, right? And this is a picture of that. But just as you talk about movies, that reference for me is like, this is when people go through severe trauma, especially at a young age, they create this other front, to deal with or to compartmentalize,
or even in Split, right, where he has altars that are female. That's normal, common. And he has one that shapeshifts into a hyper strength. That stuff is kind of real. You can have hyper strength super soldier programming, is you can have an alter part that is superhuman strength. I mean, these are some crazy things, but people detail
that's the goal,
it.
Right? Is it the goal with these projects, is to sort of create these vessels, like these people, the trauma-based controlled vessels that you can activate at some point?
Yes. And that was really what the Black Awake, Russ Dizdars was about. At some point, you have all these sleepers, they're going to be activated. And I believe what's happening in the world today is stopping that from happening, that a lot of these survivors waking up to their story are able to help free and rescue other survivors who are, it's kind of hard to explain if we get a chance to talk about it. But
can we talk about that? Because obviously, this is like what most people's childhood was, playing board games and video games.
Sure.
How do kids get selected for these programs? How do they get sort of trafficked into these arenas that are like normal people later on in life, and being like, whoa, I had this weird, because some people are like, I didn't know anybody that had anything like that. Well, you didn't know that you knew somebody.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah. And so again, most of it is in the family. So your parents are Satanists. And so they start programming you in the womb. They start traumatizing you in the womb, causing splits in the womb.
How do they do that?
It's very methodology.
How do they do that,
electroshock on the womb, drugs, traumatizing the mother. So they have a lot. They have, Mengele was a smart guy. I mean, these are like 500 MIT level scientists creating this type of stuff. And so they start young, and the big part of the programming is to forget. They create amnesic parts. And when you understand survival, like, we cannot be in a constant state of trauma and survive. Our body can't grow. Yeah. We don't have enough energy for our cells to replicate. So let's say a child was sexually abused by their father every night. So essentially what would happen is 11:59, that little girl switches into this alter personality. Dad comes in the room, sexually abuses her. She switches back, wakes up in the morning, has no recollection of it happening. That's not demonic. That's survival. That's how our brain is designed to cope with severe trauma. That's not necessarily satanic ritual abuse. That could happen to anybody just in an incest family, which I believe 100% of the time comes down from Freemasonry, which is a cult. Those types of things, almost all my clients don't just have all their memories come back at once. They remember something, we work through it, and another layer comes up, another layer comes up. They journal, and they're journaling, they spend time with God. God's gracious. He doesn't let the memories flood. And one of the reasons a lot of people don't have their memories is they don't have the bandwidth to deal with it yet. The parts or altars are keeping those memories encapsulated because their life is too stressful. So as we heal the body and the soul, they have more bandwidth to go back and deal with these repressed memories or the parts to come forward. And like I said, some people think their life was pretty normal. and I'll give you one example, and I'm obviously not going to use any names, but here's a woman who's very anointed. She's had an inner healing ministry for 20 years. She's in her early 40s. She reached out to me a couple years ago, and her memories had started coming back. But one of her couple of her conscious memories was she was in the hospital all the time. Well, that's not normal, right? And so sometimes there's this doesn't connect to this, or my mother doesn't remember taking me to the hospital. And then one of her other memories, which I think is interesting, is her grandmother was a college professor. And so college professors don't make a lot of money. So her grandmother flies her to England on a trip. She's like 8. They stay at a hotel, and she remembers that King Charles stayed at that hotel. So it must have been a nice hotel.
Yeah.
And then the next day they go to this castle, and somebody walks in. Castles are big places of Illuminati and ritual abuse and things. So this guy comes out and greets the grandmother and by name and says, "Oh, this must be your granddaughter you've told us about." And so that's all weird. And then she remembers nothing after that. Next thing she remembers, she wakes up in her bed in the hotel. Those memories stick with people. They have some amount of conscious memory that they can't reconcile, and they just go, "I don't know, doesn't make sense." As they start to wake up to their story and learn about SRA, about Illuminati, about all this stuff, these weird little snapshots of their childhood that never made sense to them suddenly fit into this puzzle piece of making sense. And why was I sick all the time? Or why was my dad always doing this? Or, things like that. They just start to come back little by little.
So like eventually you get to an age where when you're younger, splitting and protecting your brain helps you survive. But then you get to an age where it's a problem. Like
Absolutely.
You start to realize like I can't function in relationships.
Right.
I can't parent very well, or I have these like reactions to things.
Yeah. And they don't remember them.
Yeah.
Like everybody said I screamed at them, and I don't remember screaming.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's all this evidence that something's wrong, but you don't know what's wrong. You go to the doctor.
So they get diagnosed with bipolar or something else when they're switching personalities.
This doesn't sound like it's not unlike sort of the alien abduction phenomena, where we talk about Mac and some of these other clinicians that did these his stories, which always people want to try to talk about. It's under hypnosis, or they have these screen memories, memory recall.
Right.
We've talked a lot with Timothy Alberino about his ufology research and the abduction phenomena. But it sounds very familiar. Like there's
and
trauma.
the same goal. It seems like.
Yeah.
Are those connected?
Yeah. So I believe one of the alien abduction things is to get DNA, is to get eggs. They do a lot of hybridization work with human DNA, with animal DNA. I believe a lot of the shape-shifting phenomena is if you infuse enough wolf DNA into a human, they believe with some magic and infusing the DNA there, they can develop a shape-shifting thing, but it's also going to have generational iniquity.
Well, it sounds like a skinwalker.
So there's skinwalkers, yeah. So you have this, you have kind of the Indian folklore with shape-shifting, and then you have the more SRA, thing. But there's quantum science behind all this. When you really understand, we're made up of atoms, and atoms are energy, and we're really just holograms, but because it's in motion, you can't go through it. And you have these brilliant people who there's so much technology that we've only seen we're about 60 or 80 years behind a lot of the technology that they've developed and they have for their personal use. But a lot of it is just really understanding the quantum phenomena.
But they're all kind of doing the same things, whether it's, human beings, human on human crime.
Right.
Or like you said, these things underground that are all meeting together with nefarious goals, and it's all different types of, you said, aliens and reptilians and humans working together for what? I mean, what's the ultimate?
So if you think about Illuminati, New World Order, right, your 13 families, they run the world. You look at World Economic Forum, Bilderberger Group, NATO, not NATO, but
The WHO.
Yeah, the WHO and the other one that we all belong to.
The World Bank and
the one that's supposed to be the global peacekeepers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What are we talking about?
I was saying the WHO, and you're like, no, I know who.
The
World Health Organization. not who?
Who?
Who again?
Who's on first?
United Nations.
United Nations,
Sorry,
yeah. So you basically have the global powers at the top of all these. And so one of the things, and again, this is a whole other rabbit trail, but what they do in the occult is that they program you to have a job. Some people's jobs is to become famous ministers or pastors. I can tell you some of those stories. People whose parents were mega church leaders and they were ritually abusing them.
Wow.
Got a few of those. Well, where are you going to do the most damage? Right? So the duplicity is, and Kathy O'Brien will speak into this, they place them so that it's not everybody, right? But you try to go up the chain of command to get something done, and you've got a programmed, person who may not even know they're programmed. They may not know they have multiple personalities. They're just somewhere in that chain of command, and they kibosh the process so it never gets executed. And that's a part of what we see so much in our politics today. We talk about all this stuff. Nothing's ever done or executed because you have these well-placed people in the government structures that are able to pull strings so they're still in control.
Still have a globalist agenda.
Yeah, it's
what
a
was
globalist.
that movie Departed with DiCaprio?
Oh, that's a great movie.
When it's like the undercover, they swap places. You have the undercover cop, and then you have the guy, the criminal that becomes the cop, and it's this war. But it seems like that's what they kind of do, right?
It is a lot of it, yeah.
There's a lot of infiltration in all these groups, and all these groups, we get the disgruntled emails from all these groups whenever,
sure,
because all these different people listen to our show. The Masons listen to our show,
sure.
The Mormons listen to our show, Catholics listen to our show, and whenever we touch one of these subjects, inherently, it's hard for them, I think, to go, oh yeah, this group I'm a part of has been infiltrated.
Yeah,
doesn't mean that the entire group is
right.
Almost like the church.
Yeah,
sure,
The church
and the
has
church,
been-
yeah. And I know people, oh, you guys always rail against the church. I'm like, yeah, because this right here, because it doesn't mean that we disassociate ourselves from the church.
Well, and here's
It's
what
just,
people
how
want
do
to
you talk about it?
understand is that I always get, your day personality is this anointed pastor who loves God, getting people saved, preaching the gospel. And then I say, after midnight, they put the hoodie on, the black hoodie.
Yeah.
And one doesn't know the other. That's how dissociated and amnesiac
So they don't even know
are.
they're doing it.
They don't.
It's terrifying.
And so we can love both of them. Jesus loves both of them. Jesus desperately wants that hoodie guy to know Jesus. And so, the mercy and grace of God for these people, they've been mind controlled. And let me we call it a double bind. A double bind is a lose-lose situation, and they're the master of tormenting. So, and I'm just going to give you one. There's a gazillion, and the Jesuits are probably the biggest masters at double binds. But so you're 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. You're in a ritual. They stick a knife in your hand, and they go, and I know this is graphic. You can cut this out if you want, but it's graphic. They go, either you stab the baby or we're going to kill your mom. So you're going to have to choose. And so, a lot of these survivors, they resist and they resist, but eventually, and then once you stab the baby, they go, see, you're evil too. You can never go out and exist in the real world because you're evil. You'll have to stay with us. Like, they are masters at mind control.
It's like Children in the Woods. That was like the story. It's so hard with me and Dad and hearing about kids being abused. It's like.
And by the time they're 10, 11, 12 years old, then they're having to do marriage ceremonies to Lucifer and make oaths and vows to gods and goddesses. And so then they all have their parts carry demons and demonic power. One of the things I found that's interesting with, as I'm working with survivors, they'll all have witch altars or occult altars. And one of the things I find, I'll give you an example. This one guy who's a strong believer, strong minister. And so we were doing some work, and he had a 12-year-old witch altar, and he wasn't willing to give up the witch altar because they kept killing his animals. And so the witch altar he kept because he believed that personality could protect them from killing his animals. And so they really have to understand there has to be this revelation of, hey, one, as long as I agree with witchcraft, that's an open door for them to continue to infiltrate me and affect me. But I also have to give this up and trust Jesus. Well, they've all been programmed from an early age that Jesus is bad or less powerful than Lucifer.
Right.
So it's not an easy process, and it's very, very, these are wonderful human beings who've had tremendous amount of torment and torture. And all the ones that I have who are my clients, they have incredible anointings to heal, to get people set free. Like, these are God's super soldiers now. They're doing amazing things in the kingdom once they're freed, because I believe in the principle, and there's some scripture to back this up. I think one's 1 Peter 5, that anything we've gone through where we've been tortured, tormented, on the other side of it, God now gives us the authority in that very realm. The things we've suffered, we then are used in those areas. Most people in alternative medicine were sick, and the medical community didn't get them well. So they became alternative practitioners.
And then they go on a mission to help everybody.
Yeah.
Get well.
And so that's what we see with these people, is they are truly changing the world once they're on the other side of, their open doors and their kind of mixture infiltration. So
how do you start as a practitioner? How do you start getting people free? Because I know that like there's a lot of different schools of thought. We've talked, there's deliverance. We've talked with exorcists from the Catholic Church, exorcists from the Protestant side. And then we've also talked to like Fern and Audrey, who do, trauma-based. They do a lot of, sounds like a lot like what you do. But how do you?
I think the first time we talked about this was with Doug Riggs.
With Doug, yeah.
Yeah, remember?
I have an interesting Doug Riggs story. Yeah. He's passed away, so.
Yeah. But that was the beginning of like, oh man, this rabbit hole, Bigfoot was nothing.
Yeah.
This rabbit hole goes real deep. Right?
Okay,
real
can
dark.
I tell a quick Doug Riggs story?
Yeah.
This was 2015. This was one of my first survivors. I have this couple come in, and he's got early stages Alzheimer's, so we're doing my work. I'll explain my modality in a minute, and that's how we get to there. And so one of the first things the mom has said is, oh, our daughter is off at some ministry somewhere, and she's accused her dad of sexually abusing her. I'm like, okay, like, not my issue, like, set it aside. Couple sessions go by, and the mom comes in with eyes as big as saucers. She goes, I got this email, and it was from Doug Riggs. And again, I'm not going to mention any names, but the daughter, he said, she's doing great. We've spent over 200 hours integrating personalities. Her dad is a high-level Illuminati figure. She was a Hitler project. Wow. And this was early on when we were just figuring out what this was. And our dad's a high-level Illuminati figure. And the wife is just looking at me like, what? She goes, I went to this guy's website. It was really weird. And I'm reading that. I'm like, oh, Jehovah's sneaky, right?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I didn't know who Doug was at the time. I said, so does his website say anything like Monarch or MK Ultra? And she goes, yes. And I went, oh. Now, I had just read On the Path of the Immortals by Tom Horn, right? So spacecraft, have you guys read the book?
Not yet.
Okay.
No.
He's talking about all the Machu Picchu and the pyramids and tying it all together, the petroglyphs in Nevada, like how it's all tied together. So I was like, okay. I said, well, either your husband's an occultist and he's part of the occult and he's got multiple personalities, or there's some other explanation. She had never been in daycare or anything where she could have been abused. So I said, let me talk to Doug and I'll get back to you. This was around Christmas time. And so I reached out to Doug and I said, hey, your client, her parents are my clients. Now, this is like a sweet little Baptist couple who work in the missions in the Baptist church. So Doug calls me and he says, the mom is just a dissociative. The dad is definitely occult involved. He's in the thing. He is not her biological father. She's a Hitler project, which is basically a petri dish baby of all of the Illuminati bloodlines poured into one bloodline. And so she was designed to be essentially, Hitler project is creating potential mothers of the Antichrist, right? And longer story to that.
This is what Doug is saying.
This is Doug telling me this. And so he says, as a matter of fact, she kind of sneaked out a couple weeks ago and went to a ritual, and she saw her dad there. And I'm like, okay, hold up. They live in Texas. You're in New York. So this guy goes to bed with his wife, gets up in the middle of the night, hops on a plane, flies to New York, puts on a black hoodie, goes to his ritual, hops on a plane, flies back to Texas, gets in bed. He goes, well, not exactly. I said, well, which part was not exactly? And he goes, the airplane. I said, so he gets up in the middle of the night, spacecraft comes and picks him up, goes to New York, takes place of I said, he's not astraling there, right? It's not an astral. He goes, no, he was there in person. I said, okay, gets on a spacecraft, comes back to Dallas or area. He wasn't in Dallas, but he's in the Texas area, and gets back in bed. He goes, Yeah. I said, so I just read this book. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So I'm like, well, so how long does it take to get from Texas to New York? He said about 15 minutes.
Jeez.
I said, okay. So that was so then I'm like, God, I really don't want to work.
Is this government or is this
This is
entity?
Yeah, SRA. Yeah, this is pretty, well, Hitler Project
the
is government.
spacecraft.
Oh, spacecraft.
Is that a government?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. They're all in bed together, right?
Yeah, but I mean the origins are.
Yeah, but if she was Hitler Project, then it was. So they're still Satanists and they're government infiltrated. They kind of all blend together at some point. If it's straight witchcraft, they're usually not government. Almost everybody else is going to be some level of government programming. So anyway, I was like,
but that's you're talking about like deep state, like dark,
yeah,
like Black Project.
yeah.
Well,
Like
if the
I don't know who owned the spacecraft.
Right.
If governments want to be in control, then they're going to want to be with the people who have the most influence.
Right.
And obviously, they're going to have to get in bed with these people eventually.
Right.
And then figure out a way to sort of write it off as a government project.
Right.
And really, it's just a cult practices.
Yes.
That's just the funding behind
Yeah.
it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you have understanding that we need the witchcraft and the magic part of it for power.
Yeah.
Right. And then we have the technology of how to create wormholes. So honestly, time travel is a fairly simple quantum principle, believe it or not. And it's if you can find the exact frequency of another point in time and space and match it, you can create a wormhole.
Einstein Rosenbridge.
Yeah. And so they've been able to do it for a very long time. And so it's just a matter of how do you then deal with that in our reality.
Crazy.
So you think stuff's coming back from the future to now?
So
Do we lose
again,
the news?
and I've listened
Back to the Future?
I've listened to a
Doc
lot of
Brown was right.
podcasts with super soldiers and stuff. These aren't all my clients, but I have clients who've done time travel and been brought on projects. And so some of it is like we call it save the world programming. Like you're going to serve your country just like military, and you're going to save the world from some disaster by traveling into the future and stopping it from happening. So you have what you would call good projects and bad projects, right? You have assassin projects, but most government assassins feel like they're killing bad guys, right? So they still believe they're doing something good. It's all part of the mind control programming. It's not God's timeline, but
Also, I was going to ask, like, how does God's sovereignty play into that? Because if you're able to like manipulate space-time in this scenario, like, how do how does God, how does God's sovereignty play into?
Well, so here's my belief theologically. I do a lot of stuff on sonship, right?
Yeah.
The metaphor I give is God is the CEO of the company, and he says, okay, kids, I'm going to let you run the company. You can run it into the ground, or you can make it successful. If you need help, come ask me for help, but I'm not going to intervene. Now, at the end of the day, I don't believe the enemy can override God's timelines. He has sovereign things that are in our scrolls, that are in our destiny, they're in the bigger picture. But in the duking it out down here, we're the ones playing the chess game with each other. And he lets it happen. Jesus said 3 times, the Lord of this world. Right? Our world we're governed by kingdom, but the world is pretty much given over to, not our Father's control.
Darkness,
Yeah, and so, we find light, we lean to light, we bring light, we're supposed to be salt and light, we're supposed to be kingdom deliverers, we're supposed to have these gifts and this authority, we walk in this realm, but the realm itself is not yet.
It's fallen. It's broken.
It's fallen. It's broken, right?
Yeah.
And so really, man is frail. Like a lot of these pastors who are falling right now, this is my opinion, I've said this for years, is that the church has made gifting and charisma more important than healing, mental, emotional health, and character. So we put these people in places because they have a healing anointing or whatever, and then they end up falling because men don't make good gods. You start adulating a man, it's not a good system. It's not the system Jesus designed. It's become a Babylonian system.
It's the trappings of celebrity.
Yeah. And it goes to their head and all that, and we're all, but by the grace of God, there go I. We're all capable of this.
Yeah.
But really pressing in to have that deep healing of your identity to where you don't need the celebrity, you don't need the fame, you're not performance driven, You know, my more recent book, Living Like a Son, is really a lot about that. Is really about, hey, this is who Jesus is raising up as sons. And sons don't have to be seen. They don't have to be famous. They don't have to have a big following. Right. And that's who's going to shift. And some of these super soldiers, you know, who've defected, they're never going to be seen or known. As a matter of fact, they got to stay safe. One of the reasons I don't go names, and, you know, I know a lot of these people who go on these podcasts, they get hammered spiritually after telling their story. They're taking a huge risk.
No, you're exposing the darkness.
Yeah.
We get a fair amount of
well, I mean,
fire.
I think it's interesting for us because we're kind of asking the questions. So they go after the guest or they go after the person who says it. And I think, you know, I was telling Luke yesterday, I was like, you know, I think one of the reasons we love the story of Batman so much is because he's there to help. He's there to like save, but he's almost a little insane. Because he's so close to what his trauma was, what he went through, the darkness he has.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, you know, the whole line, you know, die the hero or become the villain eventually, right? And so these pastors, that's what's happening, is they start out the hero and then slowly they get too close to the celebrity and then they get burned by it. But also working with victims and stuff, you have to keep yourself, or doing 50 years of exorcisms. You don't think that's going to mess with you when you're dealing with demons day in and day out?
Yeah.
What's that going to do to you psychologically when your work is to fight the darkness on a daily basis? How do you stay grounded? How do you come back to the source? How do you understand what you're doing?
How do you not
That's
get
a good
bogged
question.
down?
I think I did a lot of my own healing for 30 years before I ever tackled this. I know God's presence so intimately. I know he's good. I know he's powerful. I know Jesus is good and he's real. I think for a lot of the survivors, you know, they have that, why did God let this happen? Yeah. And I'm like, well, God gave your parents authority over you. They're the ones that let it happen. But there's so many cool stories, too, where Jesus did intervene or he showed up and comforted them. And I think the best answer, which is not a good answer, but it's the best answer that most is somewhere in heaven, in their pre-Adamic existence, they said yes to this assignment. And so they know the end of their scroll. They don't know it here in this timeline, but somewhere up there when God said, would you be willing to go into this existence and do this trauma, knowing that somehow it's going to bring this outcome down the road? And they said yes. And so there's no easy answer to go, why did this happen to me? And I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how graphic the trauma and brutal it is. But it's such a gift to not remember. But then when Jesus really heals the memories, they almost seem like a story you're reading on a book with no empathy. They don't remember. The pain's gone. The pain's detached from the event. So, I mean, I can be a little desensitized because I've done it so long. But part of the desensitization is I've seen people process the really hard trauma and come out on the other side. And then, you know, once you're in that place of kind of glory or peace, or you've processed through that, there's something so redemptive about that. And it's so powerful. And then these people are living these lives. Now, they're doing stuff in the spirit realm that's hard to explain. And I don't have they're seers. I'll share one story that's really cool, because this isn't somebody who really knows a lot of this stuff, but she had a mermaid altar, and so mermaid altar was a pretty high-level goddess royalty in the mermaid kingdom, which is another thing that Montauk did, was they had portals into the water kingdom. But she said one day, she said Jesus just took her into like a 4-hour vision. She wasn't doing anything. She was just sitting around. Said Jesus took her into this 4-hour vision, and she's just sitting with him, and they're watching all of these mer people jump stream and leave the dark realm and jump into Jesus' stream and throw their crowns at Jesus' feet. I get emotional when I share this. He said, they're doing that because they saw you do it.
Wow.
And if you just grasp that principle, Svali, who's a very well-known, famous deprogrammer from the Jesuit, I mean, her books are brutal to read. She said more people have defected from the Jesuit programming because you can't get out. They will kill you. And she said more people have defected because she got out and they can't touch her. They can't kill her. And so these are very real people's stories. So my client isn't super spiritual, right? She just sat there. Jesus just took her into this vision. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening with these survivors who are coming on the other side, is Jesus is just taking them in and showing them how, they're able to bust these realms open. I'll give you one other principle or couple, but one is almost all concerts are rituals. That's not hard to believe, right? So when you go to a ritual, you're participating by being there. Now you think about a heavy metal concert or whatever. Most people are altered, right? They've done drugs or drunk heavily. So your mind is a portal, right? We are open to other dimensions, especially when we're drugs or altered, okay? So for a lot of these people, they literally have what we call, like, parts of them will stay stuck in this realm. A realm is created by heightened emotion, by heightened trauma, heightened emotion. So, think about the Travis Scott concert, that whole thing, okay? Yeah. So you're in a heavy metal concert, 50,000 people are there, you're all in unity together, these are all principles, and you're being traumatized because you're watching a ritual, and you try to minimize it, but you're still watching a ritual. There's demons everywhere in that realm. And so my one client, before she woke up to her story, she was a heavy metal fan, right? So we went through and we kind of cleared all of her heavy metal concert stuff. And then God took her in and literally gave her explosives, and she blew up the realms, which meant that all of those people who might have had parts, I know this is kind of weird to understand, but this is how it works. They had parts stuck in those realms. Parts of their soul were left behind because they trauma bonded, because they were in a ritual. And so Jesus would just take her in and she would blow up. And so 50,000 parts are freed just like that. Wow. And they go back to whoever their original owners. They may not notice any different, but it's one less point of access that the enemy has in their life after that. So you've got hundreds of survivors who are getting healed doing this kind of stuff. And I believe, not that you guys aren't absolutely amazing, but I believe that's one of the reasons your podcast is blown up, is because the veil over all this darkness stuff is being lifted. And we're even with what's going on in the churches, it's a veil. The darkness was there. It's been there a long time. The veils are being lifted. People are open to learning now because the haze that's been over us is clearing. And I believe some of that is because of how Jesus is using these former mind-controlled super soldier people for his kingdom and his army now.
So there's sort of day-to-day battles, and then you said that there was a point in time when they don't win.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of the debate in our channels is there's some crescendo here. We're going towards something
right.
They're abducting people. They've been doing it a long time. There's hybrids among us. There's spaceships coming. People are talking about all this other stuff. What? And you say you have joy and hope, and that's your message.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of what we try to do with our podcast is, we dabble in this stuff, but we also try to say at the end of this is why it's important to have these conversations, because there is hope, there is joy. So what do you see at the end of the macro battle inside the micro fights that you deal with?
That's a good question. I'm going to give you some thoughts. I'm not saying they're right.
Yeah.
The New World Order is the ultimate agenda on their end, right? The Antichrist, rule the world, that all kind of thing. Whenever that's supposed to happen. This has been going on a long time. I'm not a date person. Kingdom of heaven is righteousness, peace, and joy, according to Rome 14:17. I don't dwell on the book of Revelation, the dark part, because there's a lot of fear that inspires. And fear is not a high-frequency emotion. God doesn't want us to live in fear. Okay, so I'm going to focus on solutions and light. I don't believe, and maybe there's an end time when that's supposed to happen. We're not there yet. But I believe in the meantime, God's given us tools to capture back the ground and territory that he told us to have. And that's what he's doing. And that's really kind of the sonship movement, is walking in the authority as sons that he wants us to have. And I believe that why this is getting dragged out, if it's getting dragged out, is he's trying to get us there. It's not about being perfect. It's about knowing our identity and walking in that identity. So I think the hope is, the second thing, there's a really good book, and it's hard to, I have a PDF copy I can give out because the guy's passed away and it's out of print, but it's called The Shining Man with Hurt Hands. And every survivor, when they start having these encounters, they go into some kind of water fountain, and a lot of ministers say the same thing. And they see this man with holes in his hands and these shiny eyes, and it's Jesus. And it's so powerful because, like, he has so much love for these witches and broken people. And when you see his love and mercy, you go, oh my gosh, like, you want to redeem all of mankind. Gosh, I'm all over the map, but a lot of people, and part of the whole Illuminati bloodline thing is they have a lot of Nephilim DNA. They're not pure human. And so I don't know what percentage you have to have before you can shapeshift, but that's part of why they inbreed and they stay in the same bloodline, is their DNA is not fully human. And that's why they do all that. But, I believe that when Jesus said it is not God's will that any should perish, anything that is created by him in his image and likeness is his desire to redeem. And so I think that's what all of this time is about, is what is our role in bringing that redemption to heal those that are deeply embedded in the occult, lift the veil off the occult. Once in quantum physics, there's a principle called collective consciousness. And if enough people focus on one thing in unity and harmony, then that thing will manifest. It's a quantum principle. We call it prayer in unity, right? It's a principle. So that's why I don't focus on we're in the end times and all that, because we can cause that to happen sooner by going, it's a done deal, it's now, it's here. I think there's some things that says we're going to have an end time harvest. We haven't seen it yet.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to share one little controversial thing. I'll probably get really backlash for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Okay. So if you guys know who Gene Decode is. All right, some people out there do. So he's this kind of weird guy who's in the really blurry space. But he shared this a few years ago. I don't know if this is true. I've never heard anyone else say it. But it gives me hope. Kind of during the whole Q movement thing. He was kind of big during the Q movement. And he's still out there. But he said that in the year 2026, the Earth is supposed to pass through a photon belt. Well, what is photon? It's light. So when you understand quantum principles, what happens when you get inundated with light? You change the vibration and the frequency of everything. Light raises the vibration. So we see all this corruption in the earth and all the pollution and all this stuff. Well, imagine quantumly if the whole earth passed through a massive outpouring of light. Like instantaneously, you would see healing, you would see poof, things disappear, darkness disappear. I don't know that that's true. I don't have any evidence of that. But I hold that thought as a plot twist that God could do. Because you go, our earth has so much corruption and pollution. And I mean, I'm in the healing space, right? So glyphosate poisoning and chemtrails and this fog, like they're just trying to kill us. I spend every day trying to get people well from just the stuff that's killing us toxically. And so I'm like, how do we fix that? Now, God can give us creative ideas, and I'm hoping, Kennedy will undo some of this stuff legislation-wise if he is allowed to. But one of the things I say is, hey, doesn't really matter who's president when you have cancer. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So can God do something massive like that, where he can just shed light on the world in a way that we can't imagine? Well, he parted the Red Sea, right? Wouldn't imagine that happening. The time stood still for Joshua. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's happened that's miraculous. So why can't we believe there could be some miraculous outpouring?
Well, I think you're laying out a great micro case of redemption, somebody who's been traumatized. But if you think about why God allows, sort of this war to rage on, do you believe, because obviously these all the darkness originated from a rebellion in heaven down here. So do you believe there's some redemption of and angelic beings watching humans being redeemed as well? Because we're both learning from each other. We don't have God in our midst like they do, right? But they're also watching us with these redemption stories, and that's encouraging them as well. And then You see what I'm saying? Like,
yes. And again, I'm sure I'll get called a heretic for saying this, but I believe that anything is redeemable because I believe that's how big and good God is. And I believe that there's free will. One of the things with, and I won't get into, post-life or whatever, but when you've been mind controlled from birth, from womb, and you've been taught Jesus is evil, right? And if you just have a straight hell perspective, well, how fair is that? How fair is it? So I believe there's other parts of the story that we can't be so black and white about theologically if you understand the character and nature of God. We have to look at the possibility. And I mean, I done a lot of theological study, and I have more questions than answers, but I think we should hold everything loosely, which you guys do an amazing job at, by the way.
Well, we've tackled that recently. Like Muslims who are in a very specific, same thing.
Yeah.
But probably, I don't know what's worse. I don't know if SRA or the things they're told the young.
Sure.
But then Jesus shows up in their dreams.
Right.
Or, John Burke was talking about how this
Indian
guy is going and he gets a chance. It's like, I think we have to not limit this idea that God, I do deal with a lot of ghosts too. And I think that just because you died in your body, that if your spirit hasn't crossed over, I mean, that's a whole show. Well, we talked to Heiser. We did his last interview.
I see ghosts getting redeemed all the time, accepting Jesus. They're still stuck in this dimension. I have a theory that if you were Freemason, that you're stuck here, that your oaths and vows tethered you here.
We'll have to do an episode on that.
Yeah. So anyway, I got a whole bunch of ghost stories that are funny, but yeah.
I think sometimes the question of that the Christians that walk away from their faith being told sort of the harder parts of the story, like
right.
God flooded the world, and then they get to an age where they're go to college or whatever, and they go, I don't like God. I don't like who he is. I don't like his story, because they don't understand why we're to endure some of this trauma.
Right.
Why the darkness is still here and prevalent. And I think that a big part of the show is let's talk about those things so that you don't think it's all worthless and you just think God's this big, mean
He's not.
Entity.
He's not. And that in my book, Living Like a Son, I talk about that. And I refer to some other books that tackle some of those harder theological premises that make God seem mean and ugly, some things some other people have done. But, I think that it really goes back to the seed war. It's this battle on this earth for destroying, we are the only creations made in his image and likeness. In all of the realm of the fallen and they're not happy about that. They're kind of pissed. They lived here before us. They didn't want us taken over. And it's this battle. It's Lucifer's battle against God. Yeah. Destroy. I mean, look at the transhumanism, what they're trying to do. I mean, nanotechnology, all of this stuff. I deal with people who are, frequency radiation, things like that. I mean, that's a lot of what's going on today. They don't need to, the reason they took Montauk when it closed down, I'll tell you how Montauk shut down, and this kind of leads into Stranger Things. So, this is the story. Again, this is really crazy, but this guy named Duncan Cameron was supposedly in the Philadelphia experiment. He was on the ship, and when they time traveled, which has been proven, right, that's declassified, and people were embedded in the ship because it blurred the frequency, their energy got mixed together. Several people jumped overboard and supposedly showed up in Montauk. And time traveled, ended up in Montauk. Duncan Cameron's one of the guys. And so the Montauk chair, which is what a lot of people remember, was what they would do is they would hook, and most of it was children because adults would die trying to do time travel. They couldn't do it. Only children were able to be successful. But so they would hook, Duncan was an adult, but they would hook this chair. Part of the story, they would hook you up to this technology, and whatever you dreamed, you could cause to manifest. So it was about psychic powers, about the quantum thing of everything's in potentiality until it collapses into physical realm. These are all technology experiments. So supposedly, Duncan Cameron's hooked up to a chair, has a nightmare of a monster. This monster comes out of a portal and starts wreaking havoc, and that's why they had to shut Montauk down. That's the story.
very
the
Stranger
monster of
Things.
Montauk.
Yeah.
So, but by that time, all the technology had been dispersed, made portable. Obviously, we don't need massive things anymore. They can be this big. By all those years, they made portable, and they could deliver it all over the world, and they're still using it. So
It's wild.
So is it more underground now? Because
Absolutely.
obviously, if it's on the surface, you have surface projects like CERN that everyone kind of knows about.
yeah,
But
CERN
we're-
was kind of the next step after Montauk to continue to try to create portals and open portals.
Open portals, yeah.
But it's more of like has sort of a science explanation, and we can explain it away. Some of this other stuff, it's obviously can't just be out in the open and where you can go and
Right.
knock on the door.
But people have written books about it. They were there.
Yeah.
They've done stories about it. Their whole life, they're talking about it. Like they're just people don't go to the deep dives to look for Google's not necessarily the best place to find them.
Well, that's the hard part, right? You
got to go to Rumble or some off,
DuckDuckGo.
DuckDuckGo. Yeah.
Nate likes that one.
If you're still with us in this episode, congratulations. I appreciate you.
So we only use 10% of our brains. We only use 10% of our hearts.
But I mean, these episodes open up so much possibility, and that is scary because you're talking about mermaids, mermaid kingdoms.
Yeah.
You're talking about
time travel.
Well, a lot of people have seen
quantums.
mermaids. They just
Yeah,
glaze
we
over.
brought on a guy who did.
Merman.
And,
said they were
and there's
singing
some pretty
around
good
his boat.
videos that don't look like
AI.
they're old and they've been
Yeah.
around a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
there's good people have captured
Well, we brought on the
them.
guy that went viral on TikTok
Yeah.
in millions of plays, and they were like singing around his.
Sirens.
Yeah, I remember that episode.
Yeah, it's just wild to me that I think we try to slow drip people in, like, okay, here's some Bigfoot stories.
Yeah.
Let's build a case for Bigfoot, 20 episodes, and then finally it's like, yeah, okay, let's build a framework for giants and all these
Right.
other things. And now we're like, we just blew the doors off. Where's all this stuff come from? What is the origin story? Because some people are just like, they can't begin to understand how this stuff exists. What have you heard to kind of piece together like different kingdoms and different entities and sort of how they're allowed to interact in our realm, or what they are, or where they're from?
Well, one, like I said, it's always been going on.
Yeah.
It was just not out in the open, right? And so obviously with technology and internet and all this now, we can explore and find out stuff we didn't know. But there's tons of books that were written pre-internet about this stuff. So I think the origin story still goes back to the original war, right? Original war between Lucifer and God through all mankind. And Lucifer's got some pretty dedicated followers. They didn't go away. I mean, Aleister Crowley, these people are in your face, right?
Yeah.
The rituals on stage, they're doing
Yeah,
rituals.
Lady Gaga
and
just had one.
Lady Gaga, yeah. I mean, it's not hidden. They're not even trying to hide anymore. Beyonce and what's her husband's name?
Jay-Z.
Jay-Z. I mean, he wears a shirt that says, "Do what thou wilt." That's Aleister Crowley's.
Crowley's,
That's Satan is
yeah.
Satan. I mean, they're not hiding this. We should. The Hollydale is a restaurant in Hollywood where you could go eat human meat. Is real. Go look it up. These things are real. I mean, you saw Richie the barber, right? He's doing the guy, and his gills are showing up on the side of his
Hey,
face.
Richie.
Like, you think he's just making up that?
No.
I mean, seriously, I understand it's hard to believe, but that's when people ask me, like, well, what's it like working with ritual abuse survivors? And I go, well, the only thing I can say is I've figured out that every movie you've ever seen is true. Go watch all the episodes of
parts
the
of it are
Agents
true?
of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
Right? They tackle all of these in all of those episodes. Well, the time travel, the shape-shifting, the mermaids, werewolves, vampires, technology that you see in movies, anything dark, they're all real. Eyes Wide Shut, like for some reason names are just slipping today. I'm usually really good at grabbing names, but the director of Eyes Wide Shut who died,
Kubrick?
Kubrick, yeah. Kubrick died before it was released because he didn't want to cut 45 minutes of it out. I mean, they're showing Illuminati rituals in it. It's a fact. Like, these are just things that are really happening, and these people who disappear and they die, and and then we forget about it.
Yeah.
Because it messes with our daily world until you meet somebody who starts telling their story, who seems like a normal person, or you meet somebody who switches personalities right in front of you and their eyes change color, or the voice changes, or, when you start experiencing some of this stuff, you have to start asking these questions. And surprisingly, you'd be surprised at how many people have had one or two blurry experiences that they just filed away with no explanation for, because these paradigm shifts. But again, God is bigger. Most people's lives won't be touched by this. But there's this quiet war going on in the spirit realm that we are winning. We're seeing the evidence of us winning. It looks darker, but it's only because the darkness is being exposed.
We're winning.
Because we're winning.
I like that.
Yeah.
It feels like if you're a seminary grad or a theologian, why do you think the Christians are the biggest skeptics of their own story?
I'll go back a little bit to my private practice. So I have a biblical studies degree in psychology, a master's in psychology, and my PhD is in quantum energy medicine and alternative medicine. So my modality is body, soul, and spirit kind of all together, and we can't separate them really well. You know, emotional things can cause physical pain, so we want to look at all of it at once. So part of, I would say, over the past 10 years for me, where I was already primed for a lot of this stuff of questioning the narrative, like I didn't vaccinate my kids because I questioned, did research. And so I've always been a critical thinker. So I think for me, because a big part of what I do with the average person is go and find limiting beliefs that you've created in states of heightened emotion in your subconscious. We're like icebergs, so about 95% of us is our subconscious. And from a quantum understanding, our thoughts and beliefs are really our faith, right? Hebrews 11. And so essentially what the law of attraction says is whatever I believe to be true is what I'll attract in my life. And so I wrote the first iteration of my book in 2013 because I'm like, all of this quantum physics stuff is in Scripture. It's all Bible. And so God took me down this road. And one of the things he spoke to me is he said in 2013, there's going to come a time where staying at a high vibration is going to be life or death. And that's really what COVID was. And that's a lot of what we're fighting now is staying well. And so there's lots of things that add to our vibration, but the whole quantum physics realm of understanding in the church has opened up massively in the past 10 years. And I think that when you start understanding this quantum realm and all that entails, you have to open yourself up to this idea of time travel, other dimensions, other realms, the possibility. I mean, if anybody's listened to your show for any years, either everybody's lying, nobody saw Bigfoot, nobody saw shapeshifters, nobody saw aliens. You have to either believe it's all a lie, or you have to go back and go, my paradigm is a programmed mindset. And theology is some pretty strong programming. You go into church and you're told XYZ by somebody you trust, and you're just told to believe it. Don't even question it. Now, once you believe something, you go find Scripture to support that. It's called confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. Critical thinking says, I'm not sure. I'm going to study. And one of my early experiences, I didn't get saved till I was 21, was I read a book by some theologian on once saved, always saved. And I read a book by another theologian on how you could lose your salvation. They both use Scripture. And I went, that's ambiguous. Mm-hmm. So I felt like what the Lord said is, if there was only one right way, it'd just be a massive cult. And I said, if you're continually exploring me and you're seeking me, not just knowledge, that's relationship with the Holy Spirit, with the Lord. Most people's theologies have changed over the years they've walked with God. Mm. And so we have to hold some things loosely, right? And even like Doug Van Dorn, talking about discovering that they didn't want all these prophecies of Jesus to actually be true, so they destroyed some of their own Scripture. Yeah. Right? Because they were pissed that everybody was following Jesus. Yeah. And, so it's like there's so many possibilities of why there's inconsistencies that we just have to hold it loosely and kind of let the Lord direct our paths. And I think what you guys do is so great because you empirically go down these roads, you get evidence-based stories, and then you still kind of go, well, we're not sure. And one of the things I love about you guys too is you'll have one podcast where someone will go, it's absolutely this way. Mm-hmm. And you go, huh? And then the next podcast, someone will say something polar opposite. And you guys don't interject at all. Like, you don't make anybody wrong. And I think that's so important in this age of deconstruction is we all have been programmed by government, by pharma, by allopathic medicine, by the church.
Yeah.
And we have to step back and go, why do we believe what we believe? And even in my most recent book, I quote Rick Warren, because for 40 years, he said women can't be ministers. And so over COVID, he said, I read like 40 different commentaries on scripture. And he said, I've changed my position after 40 years. He said, because I'd only read like all the Baptist ones. And he said, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm like, sorry's not going to cut it for all those people who didn't fulfill their destiny because you told them women can't be ministers. And so after, what is he, in his 70s? He changed his theological position that he stood staunch on for 40 years.
Well, yeah, Rob, I think that's kind of why we do what we do, right? It's like it's having the folks on to say, this is my research and this is my conclusion.
Right.
And I think when you listen and you disagree, I always want to say, well, congratulations, you're critical thinking. You're taking this and you're deciding, I don't think I disagree with that. Why? Right? Or I don't think I agree with that. Why? Or I do agree with that. Why? And I think that's something like that in our society, especially. Everybody just wants an answer, and they want this. This is for sure thing. It's a for sure thing. Or they want confirmation bias. Like I believe this, so I'm going to listen to things in this echo chamber that reinforce what I say. And I think we host a show, Nate and I. There's a lot of things where like I'm not there yet, or I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah.
But this is that person's position, and critical thinking and free speech would say that allows for the best ideas to come to the top. So, and you also quoted Mike, you paraphrased Mike, which I loved. It's just like, if just one of these is true, it breaks the paradigm, right? Like, so all these stories, everything you've told us, all things you hear from SRA victims, you could say everyone is lying. That's a much harder conclusion than they're telling the truth.
And Dan Duvall interviews lots of great survivors on his story for years, right? Most of my clients won't listen to his podcast because they might trigger them. They're telling me the same stuff. They've never. So if you think, oh, they just picked, they just are copying. First of all, I'm thinking, you really don't want to be a survivor. It's not something you really want as your identity. Yeah. There would be no reason you would make it up. And when people are abreacting, they're not faking it.
Yeah.
They're in distress. So it's kind of hard to fake. Like, you've got to be a little mentally ill to decide you want to have been satanically ritually abused. And because who wants to be your friend, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you exist in the world?
I wanted to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, and I was thinking to myself, you said something about if it's just one person's message, it's a cult.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself that, the Bible is 40 different authors or so, and they're all telling the same story. Not one person has the whole story.
Right.
And I think you look at some of these major occult, where they start, one guy, one person who starts this whole thing that everyone believes in. And
right, I'm the arbiter of truth. I'm the messenger of God. It's correct.
I have the full revelation.
And
I'm Jesus incarnate, right? Yeah. Listen to me. I have the message.
Which is why Christianity is so unique.
Which you guys are close to one of those right here locally.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
But
they made a documentary about
and a cult. You can get it in the same place.
But I think what you're describing is so much bigger than universalism, which is what a trained theologian will say. Well, that's universalism, and I don't think that's what you're saying. It's just it's bigger. It's that on top of all of these layers of human systems is God, His kingdom, and His love.
Yeah,
and that He's going to use any and everything He can to convey this message, whether it's 40 authors in this ancient book, or showing up in a dream.
Yeah.
And we all go, well, it can happen in the book, but it can't happen in a dream. We limit ourselves the way we can learn the truth. And I think we're afraid. And obviously, there's so many people listening to this. This is all New Age, is what they're thinking when they're listening to this whole podcast.
Yeah.
This is all New Age. This is all New Age. Where did the New Age get it from?
Well, and really why I wrote the books, in my book Thrive, is I've never been in the New Age. I've never been in the occult. No one in my family's been I'm as crispy, clean, normal.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm weird.
Yeah.
So
gluten-free.
Gluten-free. Well,
right,
no.
good.
Yeah. Just organic, not gluten-free. Yeah.
Super crispy. Crunchy.
But the New Age just stole our stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, take our stuff back. You know, amethyst is an amazing stone. It's got a very high frequency. I sleep on I have a biomat. It's got 28 pounds of crushed amethyst in it. There's science behind what that amethyst is doing in your body. It's not spiritual.
Yeah.
You've got quartz in your phone. You're going to throw out crystals, throw it all out because they have properties. And when we go back and we take our stuff and we go, and this is one of the things, okay, so what I use in my practice is called muscle response testing or applied kinesiology, okay? Thousands of people all over the world have used it. Lots of Christians use it. Our body is about communication. Everything we're supercomputers. You remember everything you've ever eaten in your life. It's in your quantum supercomputer. It's just not important. Muscle response testing works like a lie detector test. I'm able to ask questions of those in those hidden places because we're connected and find yes or no answers. So I have a toolbox that I allow to do that. So that's how I can find where do you have generational iniquities. You're not going to necessarily know your grandfather was a Mason, but your subconscious DNA knows that. And so muscle response testing, which is science, okay, it's based on quantum principles, and lots of practitioners use it, Christian practitioners, New Agers and witches use it too. So it's not about the tool, it's about the person and their motive and their intention as to why they're using it. And so we take back our stuff. I say this all the time. I find witchcraft, I find ghosts, I find demons, I find generational iniquity using muscle testing that people don't know are there. And we get them free from it, okay?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, you know, Satan's not going to go against his own kingdom to get people free.
Right.
But because there's so much duplicity, so much infiltration and confusion, I honestly believe muscle testing is a tool that God has given us for such a time as this, because if we use it correctly, we can get clarity. I don't ask future-based questions. That's a divination. Yeah. You can use it wrongly.
Yeah.
But it's actually I can put you
doesn't
up
mean it doesn't exist.
Right. I can put you up to a device and you can hold it and your frequency will go into a computer with software and it will read every mineral deficiency you have. It will read your emotional issues. It will read your generational issues. So nobody's talking, nobody's interacting. You're hooked up to a device reading your energy field. And that technology's been around a long time. It's just the allopathic community doesn't like it, so they call us quacks or New Agers or whatever. But it's very grounded in science, and a lot of Christians use it because it's a very effective tool to help people get healed and get free.
It's wild. I mean, I think if you've suffered, if you've had health issues, if you had problems, this is all making sense because you went down every road you could to get healed, and you don't have healing.
Yeah.
But if you've never had any of those kinds of struggles, you're the biggest skeptic of this information. So I think, what we do here at Blurry is try and learn. The goal was always like for us to learn, Luke and I to learn, what is Bigfoot? What is this alternate history? Why were these things built? What is this Nephilim stuff? And we brought our listeners along with us. And like, if you want to learn something, I love how Joe and Franco said recently, like, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
You're going to make mistakes along the truth journey if you want to know what the truth is. And I think a lot of artists in history have been trying to tell the truth to the people. That doesn't mean they always get it right, but it's always an artist who's trying to uncover these things and tell the people what the truth is.
Yeah.
And it's rarely like some guy in a robe that's been given this position. It's some crazy guy in the woods. It's like Samuel, walking out of the bushes and like, here's the truth.
Or think of Bill Schneebling, right? Yeah. Like, he's a pretty sane guy, even though he looks like an Amish, minister.
Yeah.
Right? He's a pretty sane guy. He was there. He walked this walk.
Yeah.
People who question Freemasonry, go read Albert Pike's book, Morals and Dogma. It says we're worshiping Lucifer in the book. Pretty hard to dispel.
Yeah.
The guy who's one of the head Freemason guys going, it's Lucifer.
Yeah.
Great architect of the universe is Lucifer. No. Even though they have scripture in there, it's all about counterfeiting mixture. It's not in your face, obvious on so many of it. That's how the enemy works the best.
Well, thanks, Robin.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been a wild ride.
Okay, can I share one funny story?
Yeah. And
Okay.
let everybody know where they can find your website and everything you're doing and your books and all that.
So let me share this story. So I'm at Costa Rica, right? I came that Thursday. So one of the things my friend and I, she's also a health practitioner, we were doing methylene blue that week, right? So methylene blue is a health product, and it's blue, and it stains blue. So your pee is blue, right? So we have a break on the thing. We go to the restroom, and there's a line of blurry visitors in the restroom. So, of course, you have to throw the toilet paper in the trash can.
Yeah.
So I go to the bathroom, and the toilet doesn't flush. And I get out of there, and I'm laughing because I'm thinking, they're all going to think I'm an alien because my pee is blue.
And they did?
I don't know. Nobody asked
this
me
lady
after,
wouldn't cleaned it. She cleaned the toilet. There's some cleaner in here,
That's true. She could have thought that, or like, that lady, her pee was blue. I wonder if she's
a lot of blue Hawaiians
a human.
at the old bar. Yeah.
That's funny. I think if anyone is still with us, I appreciate it, because I think that a lot of our listeners have come along this journey, and I like these conversations because they help me kind of rearrange the furniture, expand the things that we've heard on different episodes that don't make a lot of sense. But then these episodes help it be, okay, I think that person was saying this too, and that makes a lot of sense. And also just to take a step back and go, this is a wild ride. This is a fascinating thing that we're all a part of.
Yeah, I didn't pick it. I just finally caved because God kept. I resisted for about 15 years, and then he just kept sneaking in there. But it's been one of the most amazing gifts that to be able to work with this population. Truly, they're amazing, and they're coming out of the woodwork. We need more practitioners. One of the things in my modality that I created is I do train people. The modality itself is for everybody. It's not just for survivors. I do have an advanced modality for survivors, but a lot of people get a lot of healing, body, soul, and spirit, which is how survivors came to their memories as we peeled back all those other layers. And a lot of my practitioners are very blurry because we deal with a lot of the same stuff. We're the people that get gone to. So
I love it. There's a lot of, Christian hippies out there, and there's a lot of, I was just in Santa Cruz a couple weekends ago, and you're walking around and you're like, it's funny to retrace my own steps and be around the different types of people and understand how they come to these things. It's like we're all trying to get back to Eden in some way, but there are quantum truths that were present in Eden.
Yes.
For instance, Christians take their shoes off and go walk through the grass. There's a health benefit to doing that, right? And all the Baptists are like, what? You're taking your shoes off, walking through the grass? That's New Age, And you're like, well, actually, the Earth's energy comes up, and maybe that's the way God designed it.
Right.
So it helps you heal your body walking on the earth. What a crazy concept, Baptist. I grew up Baptist, so I can pick on the Baptist.
I was there.
But all these ideas, it's funny how even taking your shoes off is controversial in the Christian space.
Well, and really,
walking on the grass, that's wild.
My books are this mindset that God designed us a certain way, and we're out of alignment with our design.
Yeah.
And our goal is to get back in alignment. And that's mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And that's really my message is how do we get back? Because sons live at peace and joy. Sons live in alignment with God's design.
Yeah.
And our world has come so far out of God's original design.
Yeah.
And we're so mind controlled to not question it. I love all your paraphernalia back here. But, as we kind of joked about earlier, I'm like, corn syrup, toxin, chemicals.
I told you.
Chemicals.
What about the Big League Chew? We are with that one?
But I'll tell you what, the food, the Wonder Bread in the 50s is not the same as the Wonder Bread in the 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the same.
Not so wonderful.
It's a
That's why
different
you guys are still going. My grandma's
monster.
102.
Yeah.
She survived it all somehow.
Yep.
But
she had to live out long to finish Gary Wayne's book, so I'm glad she did.
Yeah, it can be long.
I appreciate it. It's really helpful. I think all these topics are good to talk about. And my last thought is that some people are interesting. They will say that you're saving people from the New Age and the occult with New Age stuff. It's like, how does that work? Even Jesus said you can't cast out demons with demon tech, right? It doesn't work that way.
Right. And read my books. I wrote theologically backed books on all of the quantum realm. It's all about the quantum principles, how to apply it, all the science behind it. There's lots of Christians who do what I do in different forms of whatever. But one of my biggest goals is that one of the things the church has not done well is acknowledge that we need to clean up our generational lines of the iniquity, because people's lives are traumatic and dramatic, and they're getting hammered. And so I kind of think of it this way. We have authority over the enemy, but if he keeps us sick and addicted and depressed and having all this drama in our life, we have no time or energy to do the battle. And so he doesn't have to go with us toe to toe. He just finds those legal grounds from our open doors, from our ancestors. And so that's one of my biggest messages is, man, we can clean up our generational line and our lives can be peaceful and drama-free. So
I love it. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for coming and see us here.
If you've got a time portal, go back, get us some 50s Wonder Bread, bring it back. Because that's the good stuff. And drop it off here. Or
go into the future and Paycheck where he gets the
and bring us back some Marty McFly. Bring us back the sports almanac. Yeah,
that's right.
What we want.
Yeah.
Get some real Coca-Cola from the early days.
That's right.
Mexican
when it had
Mexican
cocaine
Coke's pretty close. Not that one. Maybe not that one. We do 18 shows in a row. That happened. Yeah.
Hey, we were in Peru chewing cocoa leaves at one point.
There you
couldn't. That was a tough one for you to kick.
We were running. We were just
climbing Machu Picchu in jeans.
So website is integratedlifestrategies.com. I have another one, drrobinbraun.com, but more of it's on the integratedlifestrategies.com website.
That's right.
Way to contact Facebook, Instagram, any of those. So
thanks, Robin.
And if you want, we're going to put out a Marty McFly vest with copper interior, and we're just gonna be cruising and healing at the same time
over the world
and 1985 all at once, right?
That's right.
We're working on that little idea in my head that we already talked about.
Retrofitted DeLorean.
Thanks for being a supporter of the show.
Yeah, thank you.
And being a member and supporting what we do.
I promote your show.
Appreciate it.
Shout out to my daughter, because she's out of my 4 daughters, she's the only one who's really excited about me being on this, because she has some blurry friends. She's like, I can't wait to tell my friends you're going to be on the show.
Awesome.
Love it. Well, thanks, Robin.
Yeah, thank you. All right.